So I opened my terminal and started my Ansible lab. And I was really motivated to start writing playbooks, roles, and I was looking for something new and refreshing for me. And you know what? I really got stuck. What to code, what to automate. I was really blank on ideas. And then I realized that the best projects I always thrive in are the ones where I integrate tools together. Quickly, I started to look for the ideas on what I could integrate Ansible with. And turns out that Ansible has fantastic Docker module that allows us smooth and easy integration of both tools. Without much thinking, I decided to write an Ansible project that involves Docker containers and Ansible. And of course, I documented my project here so you can also practice. Let's go. We need to install Grafana from container that will be provisioned on both our target nodes that are running Ubuntu. So this is where we have the orange icon here on the picture, and both of the machines are being managed from Ansible. So basically our master node will be responsible for managing and configuring both target machines with Docker. In order to accomplish our project, we will need to do following requirements. First of all, we will need to create a dedicated role for Docker. And there in task file, we will need to define each step that our Ansible needs to proceed with in order to install the desired service. Later on, in the second stage, we need to use the Docker image module to get the Grafana image on our target machines. And this is really fun task because the Docker image module is the very special one, and I really would like to show you how to do it, how you can actually manage Docker with this specific Ansible image module. In the first step, we are going to use yet another Docker related module that is called Docker container, and here we are not managing the Docker image anymore. We are actually building the container from the image. And last but not least, we're also going to run some verification in order to verify that the service is reachable. We get the 200 server code back, and the containers are running. Let's go. Okay, let's now move on to our CLI. As one of the first things, I'm going to show you my inventory so you can see which nodes do I have. And as I previously explained on the diagram, we have two nodes, Web 1 and Web 2, and we have simple inventory parameters like the IP, user, and the private key that I'm using for connecting to the machine. Let's run quick ad hoc command. And we can see that both nodes are already available, are already pre-configured the environment in order for us to proceed with the installation. Alright, one of the first things we need to do is actually to create our playbook that we're going to call the role. So the playbook is going to call deployment Grafana. So I'm not going to put any tasks here into the playbook. I'm going to put all of the tasks into the dedicated task file in the role. So let's call our playbook install Grafana from container. We are going to select all the hosts in our inventory, and also we're going to run it as a sudo or in the become role and in the become mode. And lastly, from this playbook, I'm just going to call the Docker container role that will have all the task, variable, templates, and files in case I need to have any. Okay, let's now leave VI and run the command that will create the roles structure for us, which is the Ansible Galaxy init Docker container role. And we see that the role was created successfully. Fantastic. Now let's go to our role and see the structure of the folders. As you can see, we have all of the needed files here, like tasks, template, vars. handlers, and basically everything that we need in order to proceed with our deployment. I'm just going to use two files types in this project, which is tasks and vars, and let's start with the tasks. So we're going to write now the first task, which is the installation of the Docker on our target machine. For that, I'm going to use the apt module, and with two parameters, name of the package, which is docker.io, and the state of the package, which is present. These are very basic apt module parameters. Apart from that, we can write, if you have Red Hat in your infrastructure and you only want to deploy Docker on Ubuntu based or Debian based system, you can also write the when statement in Ansible, which is like a conditional that allows to only cherry pick the specific nodes. Let's leave from here and now run the playbook that is calling the role. And we can see that both of the machines were configured with Docker. Fantastic. Let's now move on to the tasks. Okay, so once we have Docker installed, it's really not enough because we also need to make sure that Docker is started. So for that, we're going to use another module, which is service, and here to make sure that our service is running, we need to declare the type of the service and also the state, which is the started in this specific case. Then I'm going to start creating the infrastructure folder for our service, which is for Grafana. I need to make sure that the var lib Grafana really exists. I'm going to use the file module, and I'm going to put the path for the directory, which is the var lib Grafana. And also I'm going to use the state, which is the directory, and the mode, which is 0755. This permission will give full access to the owner and read execute to others. Now we can move to the Docker related modules. And here, first of all, I'm going to pull the Docker because before we build a container from the image, we need to make sure that we have the image already pulled. So we are going to use the Docker image module, and the task is going to be called pull Grafana Docker image, and the name of our image, I'm going to put it as a variable because we also want our role to be a bit more dynamic. So the variable will be defined in dedicated file for the vars for the variable. And also I'm going to select the source of our Docker image, which is pull. Once I already pull the image, I am able to build the Docker container from it. So in order to tell Ansible to build container out of the image, I'm going to use the Docker container module, which we see is a different one than the previous one. So in this specific case, we are going to also declare the name of our container that we want to run. Again, this is the variable that will be stored in the vars file. We also need to provide the image name. Again, we're going to refer to the vars file, and then we're going to start the container. We're going to map port 3000 of the container to port 3000 of our host, so we can access Grafana via the browser. And also we're going to write the restart policy always to make sure that the container restarts if the system reboots or the container crashes. And last but not least, we're also going to mount a Docker manage volume Grafana storage to var Grafana for the data persistence. Here, one more parameter, which is the Docker enabled. This is actually not enabled true, but enabled yes. I corrected it later on. And also here we need to add the space in the if statement to make sure that everything will work nicely. Okay, now we are leaving the tasks file and we are going to open the vars to define both of the variables that we are referring to in our role. So as you might remember, we have only two variables that we need to tell Ansible which ones to use, and the first one is the container name, the way we want to call it. So I'm just going to call it Grafana, and apart from the container name, also need to give the image name to tell Ansible or to tell Docker which exactly image name we should pull from Docker Hub. Okay, now let's run our playbook. We are gathering facts. And now we can see that we are running our tasks step by step. I already ran the tasks, so I know that everything was correct. Some of the actions were already completed before I started the recording, like pulling the image. To verify that we have everything already in place, now I'm going to move to one of my target machines. This is actually server 1, and we are going to run the sudo docker images, and we can see that we have Grafana image here, which is perfect. And also let's see whether container is running, and perfect. We can see that the Grafana container that was created about 1 minute ago is running. Apart from the docker ps, we can also write systemctl status docker service. Right, docker is working just perfectly fine. Excellent. Right, in the next step, now we are going to move on to the configuration of the firewalls, because now we know that the service is running, but we still want to be able to see it in our browser. So basically, we also know that Grafana is operating at the port 3000. So we are going to write the task that will open this specific port with the uncomplicated firewall that will allow us the traffic on port 3000 for the TCP based traffic. So here it's a next task. It's an opening port. The rule is going to be allow the port that we already mentioned, and the underlying protocol is TCP. Next, in order to verify from Ansible that the service is reachable, we can execute the shell command that will get the public IP that with the usage of curl. Here I'm just going using the shell command. And we're also going to tell Ansible that we don't want this task to modify the system state by indicating false in change to n. After we of course run the shell command, we're going to register the value, the output of the shell command with the public IP result variable, and later on we are going to pass this variable to the next task, which is check if Grafana is accessible via HTTP. And we are using the curl to request Grafana's API health endpoint to fetch only the HTTP status code. So basically, in this task, we're going to store the result of this curl operation, for example, 200 in Grafana HTTP status variable. Just like in the previous case, we are registering the value of the output from the shell command. So in this task we are using the IP, the public IP that we obtained from the previous getting the public IP task. As a result of this task, we can see in the logs while we be running Ansible whether the service is accessible or not, and that will save time because we don't need to go to the server to verify whether the server is running or not. We can see right away the status code in the Ansible log. Moving on, now we are just going to verify Grafana HTTP code is 200 by debugging the method or debugging the variable from the previous task, just basically indicating the system is online with the code, and we are just using the variable from the previous task with the std out. Basically, we're just displaying the message that shows the HTTP code retrieved in the previous task. Of course, we know that the code that will confirm that the service is operational is 200 if you have a different code, then you know that you need to do some troubleshooting, which is of course also very useful from the Linux administration or DevOps perspective, right? Okay, now let's just run it. And we can see that all the tasks are running pretty nicely. Exactly as I already explained, we can see in the Ansible log right away what is the status code of our service. Last but not least, what we can also run is to basically obtain some Docker container logs if case we want to, the status code is not 200, it's something different. We can also run the Docker container logs, so we don't need to go to the target system, we can just basically do it from Ansible, we can print the logs, and here, just like in the previous examples, we can use the shell command, so we just shelling or running the bash script on our target machine with Ansible, that is Docker logs Grafana, and then we are piping to tail. Once we run this shell command, we would like to register its output and then pass it to the printing or debugging task that is using the debug module. So this is the mechanism that we have seen already in the tasks above. And here I'm just passing the whole message, which is the container logs.stdout. Fantastic, let's just save it and rerun the tasks. The playbook is running, and we can see now that we have some extra information that we got from the Docker container with the informations that were piped from the tail of the logs. Last but not least, we can just run Grafana, and we can see we are using the public IP. I'm using the port 3000. The service is operational. It is running on our target machines. We can now log in and use the service to our convenience. This project will allow you to configure from one centralized node the Docker containers on your distributed system, right? In case you have more nodes and you would like to automate building and provisioning the service with the Docker related containers and images, you can do it from the one centralized master node, just like here in Ansible, right? So this is pretty neat scenario, this is pretty neat project, I think, and it's quite useful. In case we would like to do some checks on our machines, we can of course run some quick ad hoc commands, like for example docker logs with the shell module, and now we can run docker logs Grafana and we can just tail last 50 lines, and then we can see that the service is running. Ansible just piped the logs from the Docker container. In case, for example, the service is not running, again you can just run a very quick shell command. This is why we have the command, this commands for docker ps, again quick verification of the service. Fantastic. Well, from my experience actually, or for example the uncomplicated firewall status, from my experience, in case the service is breaking, requires troubleshooting, it doesn't work, it is much better just to go to the server, of course, rather than to troubleshoot it remotely, because you want to be more in the control, more in the flexible seat. But for the quick checks on what is going on in your service, ad hoc commands are really perfect. And that's everything for today. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it, and see you next time.